Prepare to journey into the unknown, where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. Tonight, we bring you 10 bone-chilling, true stories of the supernatural that will send shivers down your spine. From haunted houses to restless spirits, these tales will test your courage and make your heart race. But be warned, for these are not your typical ghost stories. These are the accounts of those who have come face to face with the unexplainable. So, dim the lights, lock your doors, and join us as we delve deep into the darkest corners of the supernatural. Welcome to 10 true disturbing paranormal and ghost scary stories. If you dare, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this is going to be a journey you won't soon forget. The night unfolded in its usual tapestry of dimly lit spaces and hushed voices. I found myself bathed in the soft glow of my computer screen, engaged in a late-night Discord call with my friends. The clock's hands pointed to 10 p.m., signaling that it was time to begin my nightly routine and prepare for slumber. Little did I know that this ordinary evening would soon be cloaked in the eerie embrace of the inexplicable. With a muted microphone, I left my friends chatting away in the virtual realm and set about my evening rituals. First on the list was the mundane task of brushing my teeth. The rhythm of the bristles against enamel provided a soothing contrast to the digital symphony playing through my headset. Returning to my room, I meticulously arranged my pillows, creating a fortress of comfort on my bed. The idea of surrendering to the embrace of sleep was tempting, but a nagging restlessness spurred me into action. There remained one more task: to close the blinds that shielded my room from the enigmatic night beyond. As I approached the window, something out of the ordinary caught my eye. A peculiar figure stood beneath the stark luminescence of a nearby street lamp. He was a man, dressed in a suit that seemed oddly out of place in the late hour. While not exceptionally tall, his presence was undeniable, and the aura of his strange appearance sent shivers down my spine. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I strained to discern the man's features. However, an inexplicable shadow obscured his face, as if an unseen hand held a veil of mystery before it. Nothing obstructed the view, yet his visage remained tantalizingly elusive. My curiosity piqued, I decided to share my peculiar sighting with my friends on the Discord call. We laughed and jestingly theorized about his presence. Perhaps he was waiting for a belated Uber ride, or maybe he had earned himself a temporary exile from the marital abode. In our banter, we christened him Suit Man, giving a mundane moniker to an enigmatic figure. Time seemed to blur as we continued to chat, the presence of Suit Man fading to the recesses of my mind. But then, like an unexpected whisper in the night, my attention was drawn back to the window. Suit Man had moved, shifting his position to stand in front of the backyard gate of the neighbor across the street. It was at this point that a series of odd details began to surface. First and foremost, he stood in an unnatural stillness, as though time itself had frozen around him. This eerie inertia was only amplified by the second peculiarity: the neighbor's floodlight remained stubbornly dormant. Our neighbors possessed a motion-triggered floodlight that cast an intrusive glare upon any who dared to approach the gate. Yet, Suitman's presence had failed to elicit even the faintest flicker of light. He stood there, illuminated, his intentions veiled in darkness. A disconcerting feeling of unease settled over me. I continued to observe, my gaze unbroken, and my mind racing with unanswerable questions. Why was Suitman standing so still? What purpose could he have in the late hours of the night? And most perplexing of all, why had he not activated the neighbor's motion sensor? My heart pounded with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The minutes ticked away as I remained rooted to my spot, silently observing Suit Man's enigmatic presence. It was as though a magnetic force held my attention, refusing to release its grip. In a moment of both curiosity and trepidation, I retrieved my phone, intent on capturing a photograph of this enigmatic figure. The act of documenting his presence felt like an assertion of my own reality, a defense against the creeping sensation that I had stumbled into an otherworldly realm. Yet, as I turned back to the window, the world outside had shifted. Suitman had vanished, his form dissipating into the obscurity of the night. It was as if he had never been there, leaving behind only the impenetrable silence of the nocturnal hours. Doubt and disquiet swirled within me as I closed the blinds, concealing the enigma that had visited my window. Though Suit Man had disappeared, his presence lingered, an indelible mark on the canvas of that peculiar night. With a trembling hand, I rejoined my friends on the Discord call, my voice betraying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The atmosphere in our virtual gathering had shifted, the jests and laughter now tempered by an unspoken acknowledgement of the inexplicable. As the hours wore on, I found myself reluctant to retire for the night. The specter of Suit Man haunted my thoughts, a mystery that defied explanation. The eerie encounter had left me with a lingering sense of disquiet, a sensation that refused to be dismissed. In the weeks that followed, a peculiar routine emerged, a daily encounter with an inexplicable melody. At the same hour each and every day, a haunting whistle echoed through the streets. Its origin remained elusive, a phantom presence that teased the boundaries of my understanding. Yet, as suddenly as it had begun, the haunting whistle ceased, retreating into the enigmatic recesses from whence it had come. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself contemplating the mysteries that had unfolded before me. The inexplicable encounter with Suit Man, the spectral whistling, and the eerie interplay of light and shadow all had converged to weave a tapestry of uncertainty. While the streets may have fallen silent, the questions that had been awakened within me persisted. In the end, I was left with a curious blend of fascination and unease, a reminder that the boundaries of the ordinary could be more porous than we dared to imagine. Suit Man had come and gone, but his enigmatic presence continued to haunt my thoughts, an enduring enigma in the fabric of my life. Allow me to elaborate, I began, with a sense of urgency in my voice. The events I was about to recount were not mere coincidences, but rather a tapestry of inexplicable occurrences that had left an indelible mark on my life. My journey into the inexplicable began with a dream that felt more real than any waking moment. In this dream, I found myself face to face with a man I had never met in the waking world, my great-grandfather. The strange part? He had passed away long before I was born, leaving me with only vague descriptions and faded photographs to conjure an image of him. In the dream, I could vividly recall his appearance, the contours of his face, the lines etched by time, and the warmth of his eyes. However, the words he spoke, the message he conveyed, remained elusive in the recesses of my memory. It was as if the dream had a purpose beyond words, a warning or a message that transcended the boundaries of ordinary comprehension. It wasn't until later, after I had seen pictures of my great-grandfather for the first time in my life, which the pieces of this puzzle began to fall into place. My grandmother, in her grief after his demise from cancer, had removed all photographs of him from the family albums and placed them in the attic. For over a decade and a half, those images had remained hidden, waiting to reveal their secrets. The moment I laid eyes on those long-forgotten photographs, a shiver ran down my spine. The man in the dream, the one who had visited me with an unspoken message, bore an uncanny resemblance to the figure captured in those photographs. It was a revelation that defied explanation, leaving me with more questions than answers. The inexplicable occurrences didn't stop there. Another incident, equally unsettling, involved a shadowy figure that seemed to mimic my mother. It was an evening like any other, and I was in my room when I heard my mother's voice calling for me from the doorway. Assuming it was her, I turned around and mumbled for her to leave me alone, thinking she had entered my room for some reason. However, as I turned, I was met with a chilling sight. The living room was right next door, and my mother was there, not standing in the doorway of my room. Confusion swept over me as I realized that the voice I had heard hadn't belonged to her. It was an imitation, a sinister mimicry of her voice that had lured me into a false sense of security. My heart raced as I confronted the fact that I had unknowingly conversed with an entity that had taken on the guise of my mother. My mother, who had been in the living room all along, oblivious to the strange encounter unfolding in my room. It was a moment of profound dread, a brush with something beyond the realm of the living. Then came the inexplicable phone call from my grandmother, a woman known in our family for her intuitive sixth sense. She didn't greet me with the usual pleasantries. Instead, she launched into a reassurance that everything would be okay. It was a message delivered without preamble, as if she had sensed the turmoil in my life without any prior knowledge. At the time of her call, I was indeed grappling with a deep sense of sadness and uncertainty about my future. How had she known? It felt as though she had tapped into some hidden reservoir of knowledge, as if she had peered into my soul and discerned my innermost thoughts and fears. It was a testament to the inexplicable connections that sometimes bind families together, transcending time and space. These unexplained encounters weren't confined to my experiences alone. My sister had her share of inexplicable calls from our grandmother, each time receiving guidance and advice that seemed to align perfectly with the challenges she faced in her life. It was as though our grandmother possessed an otherworldly insight, a connection to a realm that eluded our understanding. The most recent enigma in my life took me on a journey into the world of the supernatural, connecting me with my Indian heritage. In our home, we had maintained a shrine for the gods, a sacred space where we paid our respects and sought divine blessings. But one fateful night, the mundane turned mystical. As I gazed upon the closed curtains that blocked any external light, a phenomenon unfolded before my eyes. A luminous blue orb danced through the room. It was a surreal sight, defying the laws of physics as it moved without a discernible source of light. What drew my attention even further was its trajectory. It moved toward the wardrobe into the sacred shrine we had built within. I couldn't explain what I had witnessed that night. I shared my experience with my husband, who offered a perspective rooted in his cultural upbringing. He believed that I had witnessed a god, a divine presence that had graced our humble abode. While I couldn't confirm the deity's identity, I couldn't deny the profound impact of that encounter. Then came a peculiar incident during the solar eclipse, a celestial event that stirred something within me. My husband possessed a necklace, a cherished heirloom that had accompanied him since infancy. His mother had extended it as he grew, and he eventually entrusted it to me whenever he had to part for extended periods. On the day of the solar eclipse, an inexplicable sickness overcame me. I felt my strength wane, my skin growing pale as I journeyed homeward on a bus. The discomfort I experienced was accompanied by an unusual burning sensation where the necklace touched my skin. Concerned, I called my husband to share my distress. His response was immediate and filled with urgency. He instructed me to remove the necklace and store it in a box as far away from me as possible. The reason? His father's mistress was rumored to practice black magic, and during the solar eclipse, the god's protection against such malevolent forces was weakened. As I followed his guidance and stored the necklace, my condition improved as swiftly as it had deteriorated. The eclipse passed, and I resumed wearing the necklace without any further issues. It was an eerie reminder that the boundaries between the ordinary and the supernatural could blur in the most unexpected ways. The final tale of the inexplicable took place in my in-laws' house in India. It was an old yet comforting abode, but a sense of unease always lingered around the staircase. My mother-in-law, initially skeptical of my presence, shared a revelation with my husband during my stay. She believed that the ghosts who had once been active within their home seemed to withdraw in my presence. According to her, my energy radiated a profound light that dispelled the lingering spirits. It was an assertion that left me both awestruck and bewildered, a testament to the enigmatic forces that surround us. And so, I find myself here with this collection of inexplicable encounters that have woven themselves into the fabric of my life. I stand at the crossroads of belief and skepticism, yearning for answers in a world where mysteries remain unsolved. What do you make of these inexplicable threads that have woven themselves into my life's tapestry? A few years back, on a seemingly ordinary evening, a group of friends had gathered at our mutual friend's house to unwind. The mood was light, and laughter filled the air as we settled in to watch TV. Little did we know that this unassuming night would unveil an enigma that defied explanation. My friend, the hostess of the evening, decided to charge her iPhone. A common enough task, or so we thought. She plugged her device into its charger, and as we continued to chatter and enjoy the show, an eerie twist of fate was set into motion. Out of nowhere, as if propelled by an invisible hand, her charger was violently wrenched from the phone's socket. It was a spectacle that defied the laws of physics. An iPhone charger, firmly plugged in, doesn't just slip away, especially not with the swiftness and force that this one exhibited. It leaped from the sofa, soared through the air, and tumbled down the nearby staircase, all at a breakneck speed. As we stood there, bewildered by what we had just witnessed, we realized that the phone itself hadn't budged an inch. It rested where it had been, an island of stillness amid the chaos. The charger, on the other hand, now lay at the foot of the staircase, its tip bent as if recoiling from some invisible force. A chilling silence enveloped the room as we exchanged perplexed glances. None of us had any explanation for what had just occurred. The idea of any one of us launching the charger with such force seemed absurd, even impossible. The charger's descent had been swift and unrelenting, and it left us in a state of disbelief. However, the inexplicable events didn't end there. As if in response to this strange occurrence, the hostess's dog began to act erratically. A typically placid animal, it suddenly transformed into a frenzy of barks and anxious whines. It raced up the stairs, its paws echoing like thunder on the steps, only to descend moments later, tail tucked and eyes wide with terror. The commotion seemed to last for an eternity, 15 agonizing minutes of relentless barking, whining, and a palpable sense of distress emanating from the once composed canine. The dog's behavior mirrored our own, mirroring our unease and the growing realization that something far beyond our comprehension had transpired. In the midst of the chaos, we couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of unease. It was as though an unseen force had made its presence known that night, a force that defied the rational and logical. I, for one, had always been skeptical of the paranormal, but the events of that evening had shaken my convictions. My friend, who called that house her home, shared with us her own eerie experiences. She claimed to have heard strange sounds in the dead of night, whispers that couldn't be traced back to any source. Her tales of the inexplicable made my skepticism waver. I couldn't deny that something strange and unexplainable had visited us that night. For me, these events echoed with a sense of the uncanny, stirring memories of my childhood in Germany. I recalled the eerie stories my grandmother used to tell tales of restless spirits and supernatural occurrences that had unfolded in the very town where I had grown up. Those stories had always felt like relics of the past, but now I couldn't help but wonder if they held a grain of truth. As we dispersed at night, haunted by the inexplicable events, we were left with more questions than answers. The normalcy of our world had been shattered by an unseen force, a reminder that there were mysteries that defied explanation, lurking just beyond the boundaries of our understanding. Summer nights on the farm were always special. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the sky painted with stars seemed to stretch on forever. My outdoor entertainment system, consisting of a large projection screen and comfortable outdoor furniture, became our haven during those warm evenings. My 15-year-old son and I shared a tradition of watching movies late into the night, wrapped in blankets beneath the vast canopy of stars. One particular night, the clock edged towards 2 or 3 a.m., and we were engrossed in a gripping thriller when it happened. A subtle noise, like a distant click, disrupted the cinematic suspense. It was a peculiar sound, akin to the erratic switching on and off of electricity. Yet, there was an unsettling quality to it, almost resembling the snapping of a fire's fingers, a reminder of the ever-present danger on our sprawling acreage. My son and I exchanged glances, an unspoken acknowledgement of the strangeness of the sound. The eerie quiet of the night heightened our senses. He whispered, his voice barely above a breath, "Do you hear that, Mom?" I nodded, a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. My son had inherited my fascination with the unknown, and we often embarked on adventures together. Tonight, however, our adventure found us uninvited. The unease propelled me to reach for the Robbie Shop flashlight we always kept nearby. Its blinding brightness provided some semblance of security. Armed with this thin beam of light, I stepped onto the outdoor deck, scanning the vast open field behind our entertainment setup. The night stretched before me in an inky black canvas, but there was nothing to see. Yet, the haunting noise persisted. I felt a growing knot of dread within me. My son, who had always been fearless, began to exhibit a rare sense of panic. This was the same boy who had delved into the depths of true crime and missing person mysteries without flinching, but now his whisper carried fear. "Mom, do you hear that too? What is it?" It was then that I decided to shine the flashlight out into the field, desperate to uncover the source of our unease. But as the powerful beam of light pierced the darkness, an inexplicable phenomenon unfolded before my eyes. The light seemed to reach a point about 10 feet from where I stood and then halted abruptly, as if hitting an invisible wall. It was like the light was reflecting back at me, revealing nothing beyond. My heart raced as I attempted to move the flashlight to the side. As the beam spread over the ground, it illuminated the grass and trees as it should have. But at that particular point, something strange occurred. My son, who rarely knew fear, now clung to me with white-knuckled hands. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, "there's something out there." My pulse quickened as I turned to him, seeking an explanation. "What do you mean, something?" He gazed at the mysterious spot where the flashlight's beam seemed to stop, his eyes wide with a mixture of dread and fascination. "It's a glimmering man, Mom. We have to get out of here now." I was taken aback. My interests often veered into the realm of the supernatural, but I had never heard of anything like this. The eerie sensation of being watched intensified, and I knew I had to heed my son's urgent plea. I quickly escorted him back into the safety of our house, my mind racing with questions. Once inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I realized I had left behind our projector and other belongings in our outdoor entertainment space. Common sense would dictate leaving them but I couldn't ignore my instincts. I needed to ensure that no real danger lurked out there, perhaps a fire that had caused the strange noises. As I cautiously stepped back onto the deck, the unnerving sound had ceased. A false sense of reassurance washed over me. I began gathering our belongings, all the while my senses on high alert. But it was then, as I shone the flashlight around, that the inexplicable happened once more. The beam of light, which had been illuminating the surroundings as expected, was abruptly blocked. It was as if something had dashed through the path of the light, momentarily obstructing it from view. Panic surged within me, and I knew I had to flee the eerie unknown that lurked outside. I raced back into the house, my heart pounding, my mind filled with dread. My son and I were safe, but the encounter had shaken me to my core. As I searched for answers, I stumbled upon accounts of the Glimmer Man, a mysterious entity that seemed to align disturbingly with our experience. The Glimmer Man, a presence that defied explanation, had visited our farm that night. It left us with more questions than answers and a chilling awareness of the uncharted territories that lay beyond our understanding. As the night's events replayed in my mind, I couldn't help but wonder about the mysteries of the world. The boundaries between reality and the inexplicable were far more porous than I had ever imagined. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting eerie shadows throughout the old house. Sarah had always been a rational person, skeptical of tales of the supernatural. But that night, in the quiet hours when darkness enveloped everything, her skepticism began to waver. It started with a small incident a month ago. She had just left her room, walking past the bathroom door. In the dim light, she glimpsed a tall figure standing in the shadows. Assuming it was a family member, she spoke to it. Yet, as her voice echoed in the corridor, the front door creaked open, and the voices of her parents and siblings filled the house. Confusion gripped her. Who had been in the bathroom? When she turned back to confront the figure, it had vanished. Perhaps she had been half asleep, she reasoned. Sarah never spoke to anyone about it. Then came the second encounter just a week ago. Sarah was seated on the kitchen floor, accompanied by her loyal dog, Chase. The clock had struck midnight, and Chase suddenly grew restless, fixated on the kitchen doorway. Confused, she turned to look, and there, in the dim light, she saw a pair of eyes. The eyes were unmistakable. They belonged to her 9-year-old sister, Molly. Sarah assumed Molly needed a late-night snack or a drink of water. "What do you need, Molly?" she asked, her voice soft. But Molly whispered nothing and glided away. Sarah rose to her feet and followed, just 3 steps behind. She knew the house like the back of her hand, and Molly couldn't have gotten far in that short span, not with those silent footsteps. Yet, as she rounded the corner where Molly had vanished, there was nothing there. A long hallway stretched ahead, but it was empty. In that bewildering moment, she felt as if her sanity was slipping through her fingers like fine sand. She messaged her mother, her fingers trembling, and asked if Molly had entered her room. Her mother replied that Molly had done so about 10 minutes ago. Sarah was perplexed. Had her sister really been in her room? Her mother confirmed, stating that Molly had been there for a while, only leaving to fetch water from the hallway. She hadn't even come close to where Sarah stood. It couldn't have been Molly. It couldn't have been anyone Sarah recognized. These strange occurrences gnawed at her like a riddle with no solution. And then, the final encounter last night at the stroke of midnight. Sarah had gotten out of bed remembering she had forgotten to feed her animals. She had just made sure they were comfortably settled in the kitchen and began ascending the stairs to the 4th floor where her library was tucked away. But as she reached the top of the staircase, the door across from the stairs creaked open ever so slowly. Sarah's heart raced, her body tensed with fear, and she did the only thing that made sense in that moment. She fled, sprinting down the stairs and barricading herself in her room, locking the door behind her. She tried to rationalize it, blaming it on the draft. But a draft couldn't turn a doorknob, and it certainly couldn't open a door with such deliberation. Her mind raced, questions swirled like a tempest. What was happening in her own home? Why was it haunting her? This wasn't the first time she had experienced such supernatural phenomena. At her old residence, similar events had transpired. Friends who had come over once never returned, citing strange sightings and unsettling experiences. She had always dismissed their tales, thinking them fanciful or exaggerated. But now, as she sat in the safety of her room, she couldn't deny the inexplicable. She longed for answers, for someone to explain the unexplainable. The weight of these eerie encounters bore down on her, and she shivered despite the warmth of her room. Sarah had always been a rational person, but that rationality was being tested to its limits. What she once thought of as the stuff of nightmares and ghost stories had become her reality. The unseen forces that inhabited her home remained an enigma, and the fear of the unknown gripped her heart with icy fingers. As the night wore on, Sarah couldn't help but ponder the words of her friends from the past. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had seen something she was only now beginning to understand. She knew one thing for sure. She didn't want to live in this house any longer, but leaving might not be enough to escape what lurked in the shadows. In the darkness, as the house held its secrets close, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she would ever find the answers she sought, or if the paranormal encounters would continue to haunt her, forever shrouded in mystery. On the night of the 9th of April at 4 a.m., an eerie calm blanketed our Washington state home. The evening had been dreary, with rain tapping relentlessly against the window panes. My girlfriend had retired to bed hours earlier, leaving me alone in the living room, engrossed in a Netflix series she had recommended. I nestled comfortably on the couch, my gaze fixed on the television screen. The pilot episode played on, drawing me deeper into its world. The ambient lighting cast a gentle glow, and the slight rustling of the curtains, dancing with the wind, added to the tranquil atmosphere. The familiarity of our cozy home wrapped around me like a warm embrace, and I lost myself in the story unfolding on the screen. But then, in an instant, everything changed. My attention was ripped away from the television screen, drawn by a movement beyond the curtains. Through the narrow 4-inch gap, I discerned the silhouette of a dark, shifting shadow. It stood motionless, a stark contrast to the serenity within. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this intrusion. The figure bore an uncanny resemblance to the infamous old hag of folklore, a crone-like entity often associated with sleep paralysis. The shadowy figure mirrored the old hag's appearance, an elderly woman with a prominent, sinister nose reminiscent of the Wicked Witch from Snow White, sans the iconic hat. But this was no fleeting image experienced during sleep paralysis. It was a tangible presence, lingering outside my living room. I sat in silence, my heart pounding, fixated on the sight. It seemed like an eternity, but it lasted only about 5 seconds as the shadowy figure slithered away from the living room and disappeared into the adjacent laundry room. Confusion and disbelief engulfed me. My rational mind desperately searched for a logical explanation. Perhaps it was a trick of the mind, an illusion conjured by my overactive imagination. But deep down, a primal fear had taken root, refusing to be dismissed. Stillness hung heavy in the house, and I strained my ears for any sign of movement within. Yet, the silence remained unbroken. I couldn't just ignore what I had witnessed, I had to uncover the truth. With cautious determination, I emerged from the living room, drawing the curtain aside, and turned right to enter the laundry room. To my surprise, the room was vacant, devoid of any trace of the shadowy figure. I cast a doubtful glance at the locked and secure garage door, but it showed no signs of tampering. Leaving the laundry room behind, I hastened my steps, my heart racing, and ascended the stairs. My sole purpose was to check on my girlfriend in our master bedroom. Given her occasional bouts of sleep paralysis, my mind raced with concern. As I reached the top step, I swung open the bedroom door, revealing my girlfriend comfortably reclining in bed, absorbed in her tablet. Realizing she was awake and not wanting to alarm her with the unsettling encounter I had just experienced downstairs, I grasped for a casual remark. "Do you want to smoke?" I offered. She declined, assuring me that she was fine, and I bid her good night. Retreating downstairs, my thoughts swirled like a tempest. The subsequent hours were consumed by intensive research, a quest to find anyone else who had encountered such a phenomenon outside the realms of sleep paralysis. However, my search yielded no results, no corroborating stories or sightings of this mysterious figure. Disheartened yet resolved, I decided to put the incident behind me and retire for the night. The warm embrace of sleep cocooned me, but it offered little solace. Upon awakening, I recounted the events of the previous night in full detail to my girlfriend. Her expression grew visibly unsettled, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. While it appeared that nothing tangible had infiltrated our home, I was certain that something had been present, a presence that defied explanation. It was my fervent belief that these entities were real, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. To those who lived nearby, I had a message: encountering the old hag did not require the confines of sleep paralysis. You never know whose home she might choose to haunt next. If you find yourself witnessing the movements of a shadow tonight, remember that it might be more than just a mere trick of the mind. The first encounter was inconspicuous, almost too subtle to believe. It was one of those nights when the darkness seemed to seep into every corner of the house, making even familiar spaces feel alien. I had left my room, and as I walked past the bathroom door, a vague unease crept over me. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, whispering secrets. There, in the darkened hallway, I could have sworn I saw a tall figure standing by the bathroom door. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated. My initial assumption was that it must be a family member. Who else could it be in the middle of the night? Acting on that belief, I spoke, my voice trembling with uncertainty. But as soon as my words hung in the air, an eerie sensation crawled down my spine. A creak echoed through the house, the unmistakable sound of the front door. The voices of my parents and siblings filled the air, their laughter and chatter cutting through the silence of the night. My confusion deepened. If they were all out there, who was this figure by the bathroom? A shiver of unease tingled in the air, like the faintest whisper of an unsettling secret. I turned back to the figure, but it was gone, vanished into thin air as if it had never been there at all. I stood there in the dimly lit hallway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I contemplated what I had seen, but ultimately decided that it was probably a trick of the mind, a product of my overactive imagination. Months passed without me mentioning that peculiar night to anyone. It seemed easier to dismiss it as a half-asleep hallucination than to delve into the realm of the unexplainable. But sometimes the things we dismiss as mere dreams or imagination refuse to stay hidden. The second encounter unfolded just last week. It was late at night, close to midnight, and I sat on the kitchen floor, keeping my faithful dog, Chase, company. The kitchen, a place of comfort and warmth during the day, seemed to transform in the dark. Shadows danced ominously, and the silence of the house felt oppressive. Chase suddenly grew agitated, his ears perked up, and he stared intently at the doorway. His low growls sent a shiver down my spine. I turned around, and there, in the doorway, I met a pair of eyes that seemed eerily familiar. They looked exactly like my sister's. Molly was only 9 years old, so my first thought was that she must need a late-night snack or a glass of water. "Hey, Molly, what do you need?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But her response was nothing short of chilling. She whispered, her voice barely audible, "Nothing," and then, almost in slow motion, she began to hover backward. A wave of dread washed over me as I scrambled to my feet. I was only 3 steps behind her, not far at all. I rounded the corner to the hallway she had entered, expecting to find her there. But there was nothing, just an empty, dimly lit corridor. My heart raced, and I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I quickly messaged my mom, needing confirmation. "Has Molly gone into your room?" I asked, desperation evident in my text. Mom replied promptly, "Yes, about 10 minutes ago." "Why?" I was perplexed, my mind spinning with confusion. "Are you sure she didn't just enter? It seemed like she was right here." Mom's response sent chills down my spine. "She's been in here for a while. She only left briefly to get some water from the hallway just a few steps from the door. She didn't come near you." It couldn't have been my sister, I realized. My heart raced, and I was left with a disconcerting question. Who or what had I encountered in that kitchen? The final encounter struck last night, just as the clock struck midnight. I had gotten out of bed, realizing I had forgotten to feed my animals. I had gone downstairs, ensuring they were well fed in the kitchen. Afterward, I decided to head to the 4th floor to retrieve a book from the library. As I reached the top of the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was an unsettling sensation that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. The door right across from the stairs creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. I hesitated for a moment, trying to rationalize the situation. But then, as if guided by an invisible hand, the door continued to inch open. A draft could explain it, I thought, but a draft couldn't turn a doorknob. Panic washed over me, and I didn't need further convincing. I ran down the stairs as if pursued by a malevolent force, locking myself in my room. I sat on my bed, my heart pounding, my mind racing. The dread that had become all too familiar consumed me. I couldn't deny it any longer. Something inexplicable was happening in my life. It wasn't the first house where these eerie encounters had occurred. Memories of my previous residence resurfaced, where friends had refused to visit a second time, citing inexplicable sightings. I had never understood their fear until now. My message to anyone who would listen echoed through the dark corners of my mind. I didn't want to live here anymore. November 13th, 2011, forever etched in my memory as the day when everything unraveled, when the fabric of reality in my family's life seemed to tear apart. It was a day that marked the culmination of a series of events, a descent into darkness that began years earlier. This chapter delves into the unsettling journey my family undertook, a journey that blurred the lines between the mundane and the supernatural. My parents had shared a union for 21 years, a partnership that endured its share of challenges. My mother, despite her inner demons, had always made an effort to grapple with her mental health issues. However, sometime in 2006, after I left for college, she made a fateful decision to go off her medications for depression. It was a turning point, and little did I know, the beginning of a more profound and disturbing transformation. At the tender age of 18, I was unversed in the intricacies of mental health. It would take years for me to understand that my mother was experiencing an adult onset of bipolar disorder, a condition characterized by unpredictable mood swings and extreme highs and lows. It was this unsettling revelation that ultimately led to the dissolution of my parents' marriage in 2008. The combination of my mother's borderline personality disorder and her newly diagnosed bipolar disorder sent her on a harrowing roller coaster ride through life. I watched helplessly as she oscillated between moments of destructive mania and the gradual fading of the woman who had raised me. When my father left her, he left her the house, the only home I had ever known. It was a beautiful, cozy place nestled on the corner, bathed in natural light that always made it feel like a sanctuary. That was until the divorce changed everything. As my mother's behavior grew more erratic, the lows in her life seemed to deepen. The house, once a haven, began to transform. It became a place of darkness and staleness, a dwelling from which I couldn't wait to escape. At first, I attributed my perception of the house to my own experience as a young adult navigating the tumultuous waters of my parents' divorce and my mother's deteriorating mental health. But as time passed, doubts began to creep in. The turning point arrived on November 13, 2011, a day forever etched in my memory. I had moved to another city by then, pursuing my own life, when a phone call from my father shook me to my core. A neighbor had grown concerned after not seeing my dog, who often lounged in the bay window for several days. This neighbor had a spare key, and when he entered the house, he discovered my mother, frail and bedridden, alongside our lifeless dog. My sister once mentioned in passing that there had been blood involved, but details remained elusive. As if this tragedy wasn't enough, the house held yet another grim secret. 3 days into cleaning the place, hired cleaners stumbled upon my cat's lifeless body, crushed between an ottoman and a chair in the back room. My mother had left a trail of darkness and mystery in her wake. In the following years, my mother slipped into a catatonic state, spending time in mental hospitals before being transferred to a nursing home. Meanwhile, the responsibility of cleaning up the house fell on my shoulders. It was a daunting task, for my mother had been a shopaholic and a hoarder, and her mental illness had only exacerbated these tendencies. When I first returned to the house, it felt oppressive, a darkness that clung to every corner, an eerie pressure that seemed to weigh down the air. But as I cleaned and sorted, gradually a transformation occurred. The house became lighter, brighter, and almost felt like home again. Or at least, something resembles it. One curious observation was that this change was gradual. The house could shift from light to dark, from inviting to oppressive, in the blink of an eye. It was as if a cloak of darkness would descend slowly, enveloping everything until the atmosphere became unbearable. During this tumultuous time, I had a boyfriend, and our relationship was far from ideal. Yet, he noticed the same peculiarities in the house that I did. There were 3 specific incidents that stand out. The first was the sound of the front door opening, a distinctive noise, given the old age of the house. To open it required a forceful shove, but to close it demanded multiple attempts, as if someone or something had gripped it tightly. We heard the door open, but we never heard it close, an impossibility that left us baffled. The second incident occurred while my boyfriend and I were in the middle room, engrossed in conversation. Suddenly, we heard distinct creaks overhead, followed by a deafening crash directly above my head in the attic. It was as if something had ascended the steps to the attic and hurled a plate or glass to the floor with great force. The sound was undeniable, and both of us heard it. We were left in disbelief, whispering to each other, convinced that someone was in the attic. Panic gripped me, and I fled to the garage, parking my car in the driveway, fearful that someone might emerge from the house. Summoning his best friend, the same friend who had experienced the front door incident, my boyfriend called for backup armed with a firearm. They conducted a thorough search of the house, top to bottom. I sat in the driveway with a vantage point to see anyone attempting to escape. However, their search yielded no intruder, and they assured me that the attic had been meticulously combed through. The third incident would be the most haunting. Over the course of 2 to 3 years, the house grew darker, and our arguments escalated to violence. Something changed within me, and I sank into a deep depression that felt unlike anything I had ever experienced. One fateful night, after a particularly savage argument, I decided to leave. I went for a drive, but when I returned, the house was no longer the same. Despite the lights being on, darkness enveloped everything. The air was heavy and cold, and it felt nearly impossible to breathe. In a moment of desperation and anger, I screamed into the darkness, commanding it to leave. As if in response, the darkness retreated, shifting backward before my eyes. I watched in disbelief as the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by light once more. My memory becomes a blur after that moment in the kitchen. The next thing I knew, I awoke in my bed, fully clothed and on top of the sheets. The house had returned to its state of darkness and staleness. The inexplicable events of that night left me grappling with the possibility that there was more to the house than met the eye. Not long after this eerie encounter, I made the decision to leave the house behind and put it up for sale. While I have faced many challenges in life since that time, I have never encountered the same darkness, sluggishness, staleness, and panic that I did in that house. Something lingers there, an intangible presence that defies rational explanation. My rational mind urges me to attribute these experiences to the pain associated with my family's history and my mother's descent into mental illness. Yet, a part of me cannot shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent inhabited that house. I wonder if it had always been there, lurking in the shadows, or if my mother's spiraling mental state had somehow invited it in. During my time in that house, I had a recurring dream. I would enter the middle room and encounter a nightmarish creature, a grotesque fusion of the alien and predator. Its eyes would lock onto mine, and in my mind, I would hear the name Widow Sullivan. There was no one in my family with such a name, and the dream remains an enigmatic puzzle. As I reflect on these chilling experiences, I am left with more questions than answers. The house holds its secrets tightly, refusing to yield to rational explanations. It serves as a haunting reminder that there are realms of existence beyond our understanding, where the line between reality and the supernatural blurs, and where shadows of the past cast long and eerie silhouettes on our lives. In the quiet moments before the day begins, when the world is still bathed in the gentle embrace of dawn, our lives often unfold in unexpected ways. It is in these ordinary moments, amidst the mundane routines, that extraordinary occurrences can take us by surprise. This chapter delves into a peculiar and spine-tingling experience, one that defies explanation and continues to linger in the corners of our minds. In our humble abode, nestled away from the bustling city, we share a bedroom adorned with a full-length mirror. It's an unassuming fixture, quietly observing the rituals of our daily lives. My wife, a creature of habit, often gravitates towards it when she's preparing to venture out into the world. It's her haven, a sacred space where she applies her makeup and loses herself in the melodies of her favorite music. The mirror is positioned at a slight angle, offering her a view of herself and the room beyond. It reflects her image, capturing the grace with which she carries herself and the subtle transformation that takes place as she readies herself for the day ahead. But what makes this mirror truly remarkable is its ability to grant me a glimpse into her world. You see, as I step out of the shower, water droplets glistening on my skin, I catch a peculiar sight in the bathroom mirror. It's not just the reflection of our bathroom that meets my gaze, but the reflection of the full-length mirror within the bedroom, which in turn reflects my wife as she sits before it. It's a cascade of images, each layer revealing a different facet of our morning routine. One particular morning, a few years ago, an incident occurred that still sends shivers down my spine. It was a day like any other, or so it seemed. I had forgotten to place a towel in the bathroom before stepping into the shower, a minor oversight that would lead to an inexplicable encounter. As the hot water cascaded over me, cleansing the remnants of sleep, I realized my mistake. There were no towels within arm's reach, and I knew my wife had recently laundered them all. Panic surged briefly, but I decided to call out to her. After all, she was just a room away. With the shower curtain pulled back, I found myself face to face with her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Babe, can you get me a towel?" I called out, my voice echoing in the confined space. Her back was turned to the bathroom, engrossed in her morning routine. I watched as she paused, her hands suspended in midair, makeup brush in hand. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had frozen. She didn't respond, didn't turn to acknowledge my request. Instead, her eyes met mine through the reflection, and an eerie silence settled between us. It was as if she had been momentarily transported to another realm, her gaze fixed on something unseen by my eyes. "Babe, nothing." No response, I muttered, perplexed and growing increasingly uneasy. But the silence remained unbroken, and her distant stare persisted. The air in the bathroom felt heavy with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense that something was amiss. With growing concern, I decided to leave the bathroom, assuming she might be upset with me for not grabbing a towel beforehand. I wrapped a towel around myself and left the bathroom, my wet footsteps trailing behind me. As I stepped out into the corridor and headed downstairs, the encounter in the bathroom weighed on my mind. Why hadn't she responded? Was she upset, or had she simply not heard me? These questions buzzed like an unwelcome swarm of bees, refusing to dissipate. It was in the midst of these thoughts that I had an unexpected encounter, one that sent my heart racing and a cold shiver down my spine. In the dimly lit hallway, I literally bumped into my wife, who was fully clothed and on her way to the laundry room. The shock was instantaneous and left me trembling. "Why are you running through the house naked?" she exclaimed, a mix of surprise and amusement in her voice. "I would have gotten you a towel." I couldn't find the words to respond immediately. Confusion and fear gripped me in equal measure. My mind raced to comprehend what had just transpired. My wife had been in the bathroom, reflected in the mirror, and yet here she stood before me, unharmed and fully dressed. I didn't think you heard me," I stammered finally, my voice trembling. I slowly retraced my steps, my mind a whirlwind of questions and uncertainty. As I cautiously made my way back upstairs and peered into the bedroom, I half expected to find some ghostly apparition lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, no one standing in front of the mirror, and no one in the bathroom. The room was as ordinary as ever, bathed in the soft morning light. I know how this sounds, like a scene lifted from the pages of a supernatural thriller. It defies rational explanation, challenging the boundaries of our understanding. But I can attest with unwavering certainty that this is precisely what I witnessed that fateful morning. In the aftermath of this inexplicable incident, I found myself plagued by questions that remained unanswered. What had I seen in that bathroom mirror? Had I stumbled upon a momentary glitch in the fabric of reality, a glimpse into a parallel world, or something else entirely? Our world is rife with mysteries that elude comprehension, moments when the ordinary takes on an extraordinary hue. This chapter serves as a testament to the unexplained, a reminder that even in the most mundane of settings, the inexplicable can find a way to stir our souls and leave an indelible mark on our lives. The night was draped in silence as I sat on the edge of the couch, my eyes flickering between the dimly lit television screen and the clock on the wall. It was nearing bedtime, and the three children I was babysitting, Tracy, Mike, and Sally, were sprawled on the living room floor, their attention fixed on the animated characters dancing across the TV. As the minutes ticked away, the room was filled with the soothing lullaby of a children's program. I had been babysitting these kids for years, and they had become as dear to me as my own family. Tracy, the eldest at 10, was a responsible and caring sister to her younger siblings. 8-year-old Mike was full of energy, always ready for a playful adventure. And then there was Sally, a 4-year-old bundle of joy and curiosity. Their parents were away on a 6-day business trip, leaving me in charge of these precious souls. The first 3 nights had been uneventful, just as I had expected. But it was the 4th night that would forever change my perspective on the world. Sally, being the youngest, was always the most challenging to put to bed. It took a combination of bedtime stories, soothing lullabies, and a bit of patience to finally get her to drift off to dreamland. After a long battle, I had succeeded. With Sally finally asleep, I tiptoed out of their shared bedroom, leaving a night light on to ward off the darkness. With a sigh of relief, I descended the stairs, eager to unwind with a TV show of my own. The house was still, and a sense of tranquility enveloped me as I sank into the couch. But that tranquility was short-lived. The silence was shattered by a sound that sent a chill down my spine, a familiar jingle of children's laughter coming from the direction of the staircase. My heart raced as I listened closely. It was Sally's ABC toy, the one with colorful buttons that taught letters and made joyful sounds. I couldn't believe my ears. Had Sally somehow managed to sneak downstairs and play with her toy? Irritated at the thought, I reluctantly left the comfort of the couch and ascended the stairs. Quietly, I pushed open the bedroom door, expecting to catch Sally in the act. To my bewilderment, all 3 children lay sound asleep in their bed. There was no sign of Sally stirring or any mischievous toys scattered on the floor. I gazed around the room in puzzlement, my eyes landing on the closet where all their toys were usually kept. I had heard the ABC toy downstairs and it had been crystal clear. It made no sense. I approached the closet and checked inside, finding no sign of the toy. My perplexity deepened. How could it be downstairs if it wasn't here? Then, like an eerie whisper in the still night, I heard it again. The toy's buttons were being pressed downstairs. Panic surged within me as I raced back downstairs, heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the ground floor, I saw the ABC toy resting on the dining room table, unattended. But what was even more unnerving was that it was off, completely powered down. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, my mind grappling with the unexplainable. With trembling hands, I opened the toy's battery compartment and removed the batteries. My heart skipped a beat when I heard Tracy's voice from the top of the stairs. "What's the matter?" she called out, concern etched in her voice. I hesitated, not wanting to scare her. "Nothing, Tracy. Just go back to bed." But Tracy, perceptive beyond her years, wasn't convinced. "You're lying. You're scared." I offered a feeble smile. "I just had a bad dream, that's all." She shook her head slowly, her eyes locked on mine. "Sebastian scared you." I furrowed my brows in confusion. "Sebastian? Who's Sebastian?" Tracy shifted in her bed to face the wall, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't let him scare you, Darlene. He just wants to play with Sally's toy." I was left dumbfounded. Who was Sebastian, and why was Tracy talking about him as if he were real? I tried to make sense of it but found no answers that night. The following night, exhaustion took over, and I managed to fall asleep without any disturbances. However, that peaceful respite was short-lived. In the dead of night, at around 4 in the morning, I was awakened by hushed whispers outside my bedroom door. The room was still bathed in darkness as I rubbed my eyes and strained to listen. The voices were coming from the children's room across the hallway. With bated breath, I tiptoed towards their room and gently pushed the door open. Tracy was sitting cross-legged on the rug, her eyes wide with surprise. "What are you doing up?" I whispered. She stared at me, her expression one of both fear and bewilderment. "Nothing," she replied, her voice trembling. "Go to bed." I couldn't help but press further. "Who are you even talking to?" Tracy remained silent, her gaze fixed on a point in the room. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I knew she was speaking to someone, but there was no one there. I whispered her name again, trying to get her attention. "Tracy, I heard you talking. Is Sebastian here?" Tracy slowly turned her head to look at me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and longing. "Sebastian's upset that you don't give him the same attention you give us. He keeps trying to catch your attention so you can take care of him too." My heart raced as I struggled to grasp the situation. Tracy was conversing with someone, or something, named Sebastian, and it seemed to have an unsettling presence in their lives. "Tracy, please," I implored, my voice barely a whisper. "Go to bed, or we can talk about this later." But Tracy was unyielding. "No, Sebastian wants your attention now. He wants you to understand." As she said this, the commotion awakened Mike and Sally, who sat up in bed, their innocent eyes filled with curiosity. The room felt charged with an inexplicable tension, and I longed for the morning light to banish the shadows of the night. Tracy's assertion that Sebastian wanted my attention haunted me as I anxiously waited for the children's parents to return. My unease grew as I wondered if this presence would linger beyond my time as their babysitter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had entered a world I never knew existed, one where the boundaries between realities and the paranormal blurred. As the hour of their parents' return approached, the unease in the house seemed to intensify. Tracy's demeanor had changed and she was unusually silent. Mike and Sally continued to play as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were aware of something I couldn't comprehend. Finally, their parents arrived, weary but relieved to be back home. The mother noticed the untouched sandwich on the dining room table and inquired about it. Tracy and the other children had already rushed outside to greet their father, leaving me alone with the mother. I lowered my voice, my anxiety palpable. The kids mentioned there's someone here, someone named Sebastian. They said he likes my attention. Her eyes widened and she guided me to the couch, her expression grave. Darlene, honey, Tracy had already told me about Sebastian liking you ever since you started babysitting them. But I told her not to tell you anything because it may startle you or you wouldn't believe her. My mind was spinning. Sebastian? The thought of being watched or haunted by an entity was deeply unsettling. The mother continued, her voice heavy with regret. It's true that there's a presence in this house. The family who lived here before us had a 4-year-old son who passed away in this very house. They moved out soon after, unable to bear the grief. My heart sank as I realized the gravity of the situation. So, Sebastian is? Yes, she confirmed. He's their son. Tracy has been able to communicate with him since she was a toddler. It's as if he never left. A shiver ran down my spine as I thought back to the inexplicable events of the past nights. Sebastian, the restless spirit of a young boy, seeking connection and play. It was both heartwarming and eerie. The mother placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Darlene, we understand if this is too much for you. Sebastian has never harmed anyone, but we know it's not easy to comprehend. You're like family to us, and we'd hate to see you go, but we'll understand if you decide otherwise. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sympathy for Sebastian. He was a child who had passed away far too soon, and he had found solace in the company of Tracy and her family. I couldn't abandon these children, my second family, in their time of need. With determination in my eyes, I smiled at the mother. I'll keep babysitting for you. Sebastian deserves our understanding and care. The mother's eyes filled with gratitude, and she squeezed my shoulder. Thank you, Darlene. We're truly grateful for your compassion. And so, I continued to babysit the 3 children, now knowing that our home was shared with a presence from beyond. The nights were no longer filled with fear, but rather with a sense of unity. For I had come to believe that even in the realms of the unknown, there could be kindness, understanding, and an enduring bond between the living and the departed. As time passed, I grew accustomed to Sebastian's playful antics, misplaced items, gentle whispers, and the occasional sound of a giggling child. I realized that my skepticism had been shattered, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the mysteries that lingered beyond the veil of our understanding. In the end, it was an experience that changed me, revealing a world where the boundaries between the living and the spectral were blurred, where the inexplicable could become a part of our everyday lives. Sebastian had taught me that sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that transcend the boundaries of life and death.